Hi all, hope all is well. Um, something I've sort of been sitting on as an idea that I'd like to put into a video format is a tier list that I have been thinking about for albums specifically. So as a preface, I'm not going to include any video game soundtracks or any classical music, partly because I feel, especially for video game soundtracks, that can be a separate tier in itself, video game OSTs. Um, Again, this will be specifically about the albums, not necessarily about the band. There's quite a few artists in here where I've got multiple albums of theirs, intentionally to discuss the fact that they would be in separate tiers despite being from the same artist. Um, so by that means, sometimes the artist is better than the album that they produced, and sometimes it's a really good album for a kind of average artist. So let's begin. Right, first up, Peace or Love by Kings of Convenience. Wonderful band. Again, it's not about the band, it's about the album itself. I think I'll include the album arts as part of the tier list because when you've got a good looking album, it can make a difference. Um, the cover's kind of meh, but the songs are brilliant. So, with that being said, this is somewhere between an S and an A tier to kick off. For now, I'll stick it in A tier, but I may move it up to S. There's a reason why it would be in A tier, but that will be discussed when it comes to it. Right, next. Songs About Jane by Maroon 5. Iconic album cover and a fantastic band and a wonderful album. So the album cover is great, all the songs are great. I'm sticking this in S tier for now, but it might move up to my top 5. Next up, Ember by Breaking Benjamin. What a band. It's an interesting album cover. It's not like great or anything, but it certainly is interesting in a sense. The songs themselves are pretty good, although they have got better. I love this album, but they have got better. That'll stay on A for now. Next, Life Starts Now by 3 Days Grace. So this was when 3 Days Grace had their previous lead singer. Um, the album cover's kind of cool. And there's a couple good songs in there, but I feel like some of it lets it down, so let's go and beat here. Right, Tourist by Athlete. Uh, this one's not quite as good as their first album. It's a great album. It's a good little album to listen to, but I feel like it's a B tier just because, well, it's not. There's a couple good songs in there, but it's not their finest. Right, Michael Jackson off the wall. As much as you love him or hate him, I love him. I think he was just a great artist. Off the wall specifically, I think might be my favourite one. Controversial, but that'll be discussed more when I put in the other ones. So for now, that'll go S tier. Right, Kamikaze by Eminem. Now, I like Eminem. Don't get me wrong. The album cover itself kind of but it's a nice enough album. Uh, I think his earlier albums were better, but for this one, I think this will be like one or two good songs that I really like, but otherwise, for me, this album falls flat. C tier. Next up, Back to Bedlam by James Blunt. Yeah, not a lot to say about this. This is one of my most listened to albums of all time. I love it. Every song is fantastic. Let's go in top 5. Right. The Ride by the Catfish and the Bottlemen. So Catfish and the Bottlemen are awesome. I really like how their album designs are all black background with a white chalk design. I think the crocodile is probably the coolest album design. But I feel, as good as the ride is, I feel like some of their other ones were. Oh, I think I put all 3 in the tier list. I know for a fact this one is, obviously. I'll give this one a somewhere between A and B tier. Let's stick it high B for now. Um, but they are a magnificent band. Next up, The Trick to Life by the Hoosiers. Now, this one's an interesting album cover because, although for the purposes of icons I've used the colourful, this multicoloured version, I actually own the red cover. This is an album cover that had various options, as it were, like color palettes. So there was this one. There was plain red, which I have. There's plain blue, and there's plain yellow. I recall. I think there's one or two others as well, but yeah, this is probably my most listened to album of all time. Absolutely timeless. I love The Trick to Life by the Hoosiers. My top five, 100%. Right, Milo Xyloto. Now, Coldplay's an interesting point of conversation. Don't get me wrong, they're fairly beloved, and Chris Martin's voice is absolutely divine. But Milo Xyloto is not that album. Whoopsie! Do you want to move you? I wanted to change your size. So, for me, this is the start of Coldplay's decline. Milo Xyloto. I think from there it's kind of most of their stuff is D and F tier, but I can discuss more about that when I come across the previous ones. So for now, D tier for Milo Xyloto. Right, Immersion by Pendulum. Love Pendulum. They're fantastic. This is my favourite album of theirs. Every single song is an absolute banger. Top five, 100%. And if you want my personal opinions on some of the songs, my favourite ones I would say is probably Self versus Self and The Fountain, actually. Don't get me wrong, The Island, both part 1 and 2 is fantastic. But, Watercolour, oh yeah, big discussion with Immersion is the song Watercolour. It's got a big, this is one of them ones where either people love it or they hate it, and I think it's down to whether you listen to the album version or the radio version. The radio version cuts out a lot of the stuff that makes the song so great, in my opinion. So, 12 Stops and Home by The Feeling. Now, this is a difficult one to judge because, like Maroon 5, Songs About Jane, I think this is probably my top 10 albums, but it's not top 5. There's a lot of fantastic songs on this album, from Feel My Little World to Never Be Lonely. There's so many good songs on this album, but I think it just falls short of my top 5. In fact, should I rearrange it so that the closer to the next tier it is, the higher up it goes? Yeah. To which I'm gonna do something like this for now, and then I'm content. But 12 Stops Home, S tier. Next up, Jollification by the Lightning Seeds. Well, this is quite an easy one. Blech. It's a I bought the album from Poundland. I then proceeded to literally throw it away. Jollification by the Lightning Seeds can go in my tier list. Jollification by the Lightning Seeds. Moving on. Kelly Clarkson, All I Ever Wanted. Banger of an album. Kelly Clarkson's voice is brilliant. She's got some real pop. She's got some real what's the phrase? She's got some sick bops. I'm just going to A tier. Good album. Right, Primo Victoria by Sabaton. So Sabaton is my personal favourite artist, alongside King to Convenience, and they have been for quite some time. Joachim is my favourite. I think is just the world's best baritone. Like, the only person that comes close is dead, i.e. Freddie Mercury. And yes, Freddie Mercury was an actual baritone, but Joachim's voice is just absolutely divine. And as a band, on a side note, the band dress is hella cool. Also, it's a really powerful. Sorry, I keep expanding and minimizing, but it's a really powerful CD album because it's just a representation of the struggles of World War II. Despite the fact that, Primo Victoria itself is a song about D-Day, but you know, powerful album. But it's not my favorite of theirs. And this is quite a low rating for considering it's my favorite band. But let's go somewhere in B tier. Let's shuffle this around a little bit like that. Next is Snow Patrol. Press the zoom out, Henry. That would be cool. Right. Final Straw by Snow Patrol. To anybody that's not British, slash English, that's whatever, you might not be as familiar with Snow Patrol, but Snow Patrol is one of them British cult classics. The album itself is fantastic. It's kind of a cool design, but not particularly the best one out there. Um, there's some really good songs in it, but I feel, despite the fact I say it's a classic, again, this would sit somewhere lower towards B, but it creeps towards A. For now, I'll give it tourist spot. Okay, so the next one to talk about is In Silico. No, stop moving it, zoom it. So In Silico is next. Again, merged into my top 5, so it can't be there because of my limiting rules based on my tier list. And to be honest, as much as I like Pendulum, this one is probably for me their weakest album. C tier. Right. Declaration of Dependence. Now, if Peace or Love is A tier, then Declaration of Dependence definitely deserves an S tier. I love Declaration of Dependence. The first time I heard this album, it it sort of disappointed me. But the more I listened to it, the more I loved it. So King's Convenience, S tier. Probably above Off the Wall for me. As great as Michael Jackson is, this album just does something for me. These top three in S tier right now, by the way, are all pretty much intertwined in which way you can do the position, so I'm happy for them to go there. Next, Evermore by Taylor Swift. So I love T Swift. She's awesome. I'm glad that she's got her own re-recordings of some of her albums. However, the album Evermore, for me, as great as T Swift is, for me this album wasn't quite as good. I think I'm gonna go C tier. Don't worry, there's a redeeming coming up for T Swift, but for now she's there. Next up, In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. This one's certainly an interesting album to talk about. Because I mean, that face. What a cover. If we're talking discussing albums just based on their cover, my god, this would be like S plus tier. But the actual album itself, although it's been hailed as the very first prog rock album, it has 5 tracks. I'm not a massive fan of I Talk to the Wind or Moonchild, so that's 2 out of 5 that let down the album because I love it. I love The Court of the Crimson King, such a good song. 21st Century Schizoid Man, fantastic. But unfortunately, the other songs for me, just for me, bring this down to a. Actually, let's move Snow Patrol further down. 3 Days Grace further down as well. For me, so it's about there. I feel fantastic. So next, I think this was the last Pendulum one I was going to talk about. Hold Your Colour. So far, Pendulum in my top 5, and they're in C tier. This album, I think, sits directly, for me, in between In Silico and Immersion. For me, this one gets A tier. And above Kelly Clarkson, somewhere about there. Right, The Art of War by Sabaton. Again, free and love the band. But unfortunately, this one, for me, actually gets a lower rating than Primo Victoria. So, I think, just for me, it sits there. Again, I've got redeeming things for some of these lower tiered albums. I just want to discuss the full scope of thoughts for albums. Okay. Mika, Life in Cartoon Motion. Very underrated album. Very underrated. Don't get me wrong, I don't quite think it's S tier. I think it's A tier. But respectfully, I feel that should have been more. This should be more seen as a good album than it deserves to be seen as, because although Grace Kelly was massive when the album came out, I think the album's got a lot of good hits that really do wonders. Also, the rainbow on the album, awesome. Very colourful, very engaging. Okay. Toxicity by System of a Down. Surge from System of a Down is absolutely awesome. There's a couple good tracks on this album. The album design's kind of simplistic. I get that it's meant to be a take on the Hollywood sign, but with the exception of a couple songs, again, this is about the whole album experience, not the individual songs. Otherwise, this tier list would be very, very different, because I'd also have different things to discuss. But for now, I think Toxicity is about a C tier. I think it's a better album than Art of War? No? No, they're about the same. I'll leave this as is. That's C tier. Okay. Holy Diver by Dio. My god. What an album. He had such an amazing voice. The album design also is really cool. Like, it really, really has a unique sort of taste to the style. This was actually an album I was listening to while I was grabbing all these images, not gonna lie, the other day. So, I feel it's deserving of a, yeah, just above Kelly Clarkson. I mean, to be fair, a lot of my A tiers, they're either A plus or they're somewhere between A plus and S. So this is my A tiers are pretty strong. Speaking of A to S tier, here's another one that sits there. Rush of Blood to the Head. Now, again, Coldplay down here, Milo Xyloto, pile of arse. This album, absolutely wonderful. A Rush of Blood to the Head is brilliant. For now, I'll stick it in S tier, but I think I need a Coldplay in my top 5, personally. Or it's like up here. Take your pick. So another popular Brit-born band, McFly, Room on the Third Floor. This was fairly popular when it came out. They actually released their stuff after Busted, I believe. They were when they first came out, they were seen as like a Busted imitation within the UK charts. The album itself, couple good hits, but for me, the whole album as an experience is probably C tier. It sits somewhere between C and B, I think. Yeah, I'm happy with it that's placed. However, I will, looking at it, I think I will move this slightly. Let's do something like that. Brilliant. So, previous discussion about Michael Jackson. Off the Wall is my favourite Michael Jackson album. This one is, I think, my close second. So this one, I think, is still S tier, but I think it's lower in the chain. Next, Vessels by Starset. As part of the Vessels conversation, I think I'll also include Transmissions. The reason being is because they're two very similar albums in both their design and the whole album as a song set. So I love Starset. I think these two albums of theirs are S tier. Also, Starset plus Breaking Benjamin, Waiting on the Sky to Change, I think is one of my top 10 songs. Just as a song, that song is in my top 10 probably. At least in my top 15, I would say, because that's just such a good song. Okay, and The Illusion of Safety by the Hoosiers. So, The Trick to Life, my top 5. The Illusion of Safety is quite strange in that their first album was so good. They have also released a new album recently, by the way, the Hoosiers. I've given it a listen, really good. I think I prefer the new album over this. I think this one is high C, low B. So I think if I just do a little jiggery pokery here, move everything over by one, I think the Hoosier sits right here. Perfect. Next, 3 days grace, 1x. Oh, by the way, these images, they're randomly, I just pulled in all, I think there's 90-ish. I just made them all 2 by 2, dragged them all into the corners, stacked them on top of each other. I actually don't know or remember the order. So anyway, 1x. Same, this was when the same lead singer was part of the Life Starts Now album. Pretty good, but not as good as Life Starts Now for me. I'm feeling about here in C tier, if I'm honest. So that's looking good. Right. Phobia by Breaking Benjamin. And I don't believe I included it on the album's covers. So I'll also treat Dear Agony as the same when it comes to Breaking Benjamin. Because Phobia and Dear Agony are so good. They were on top of the Dio album, Holy Diver. Phobia was also another album I was listening to while grabbing all these images. For me, S tier. Not top. I don't think it's in my top 10, but it is a wonderful album. Okay. Left to the Middle by Natalie Imbruglia. Again, another underrated artist. She's brilliant. Really good album. I think the reason why she's underrated is because, for instance, her and Natasha Benningfield are sort of on par with each other. But I feel like Left to the Middle sits about here. So why did you put the Ride in B tier? You know what? They're both kind of B heading into C, but I think I'm going to swap there. Fantastic. Again, by no means necessary is anything in below a B tier bad, with some exceptions. Cough, cough, cough. Actually, no. D tier is also kind of us, not gonna lie. But, so it's not like these are bad albums, it's just as a respective tier list. Some things have just got to be better than others sometimes, I guess. Right. The Logic Will Break Your Heart by the Stills. Boring cover, boring album. When I just mentioned about the whole, just because they're in a tier list doesn't mean the albums are worse than others, but this one's a bin. Just bin it. Realistically, let's be honest with ourselves. Ha! Hopes and Fears by Keane. Probably one of the best albums of the Noise, and still not in my top 5. Love it. It sits. I think this album sits in my top 10. So it goes roughly where Declaration of Independence is. So let's pull these out. This goes here. And these come into here. In fact, I'm going to play a little jiggery pokery with this. Something like that's appropriate. Brilliant. Okay. Noah and the Whale, Peaceful the World Lays Me Down. Brilliant album. His voice is awesome. I don't think it's S tier. I like the album design. It's very cool. The whole album is really good. There's some absolute bangers on there. Again, 5 years time, I think is track 4 on the album. I could go and reach it and grab it and have a check, but I think it's track 4 or 5. Absolute banger. But the whole album as a whole album, I think sits somewhere right between Natalie Imbruglia and Catfish and the Bottlemen for this album. So I'm putting it low A. Well, I think it's high B, low A. Chasing the Horizon by Man with a Mission. Another awesome album. This is I think this is the one where if the divide between B and A wasn't truly hard set, if I had the plus tiers, this would probably be a B plus, maybe a low A. Like, kind of similar to Noah and the Whale and the positioning, so stick it here. So King Crimson Discipline. So for me, while in the Court of the Crimson King is a B tier album, Discipline has got to be between A and S. Absolutely love this album. There's so many good songs in this album. Love Mata Kudasai. Love Fella Hunjinji. There's some good songs on Discipline. Low S. Natasha Bedingfield, unwritten. So previous point of contention with Natalie Imbruglia. I think this album's as great as Left of the Middle is. I think Unwritten slightly better. So I'm gonna stick that just before Man with a Mission, because although these are all like borderline in the tier, I feel like Chasing the Horizon is a better album for me than Unwritten. Okay. Controversy, The Wall by Pink Floyd. Oops, did I just drag every single one of my next images? I did, fantastic. Let's bring these back down. So The Wall by Pink Floyd. Yeah, Pink Floyd are, iconic as a band. They have another really popular album, which I will be discussing, but for now, The Wall is a good album. Let's stick it before Natasha Bedingfield. I feel like this is actually here, funnily enough. Again, Pink Floyd have got good individual songs, but I feel like the album for me is just not quite the same. The War to End All Wars by Sabaton. This was one I wanted to talk about, because a lot of people don't necessarily know this. Okay, I'll just point it out. This has got 2 ratings. This album actually has 2 ratings from me, because there's actually 2 editions of the album. Technically, I believe there's a third, because there's also the, what did they call it? The classical composition version, I think they referred to it as. Or did they just call it the orchestral version? There's a third one, but to be honest, I like it with the vocals. So the War to End All Wars is that you have the basic album edition, which is S tier, and then you have what I would consider in my top 5, the historic edition. And yes, the 2 tracks on the historic edition actually make the history edition actually make the difference for me. Versailles and Sarajevo, fantastic songs. I mean, you reverse the order because the album starts with Sarajevo because that's where Franz Ferdinand was shot, and then the album ends with Versailles. So they it's just absolute pure work of art, put simply. Right, next up, One Step Beyond by Madness. Yeah, one of my favorite artists, and the album, I think I will put it. I think this would be an S minus, so let's stick it there. 13 Senses by The Invitation. So this is a fairly little known band. This was their debut album, but they kind of got overshadowed by Coldplay because that's about the time they were releasing. I believe The Invitation is 2003, 2004. So it's about the time that X and Y came out. So they kind of got overshadowed. Good album though. Makes for a really decent listening experience. Really decent listening experience. Like I think these are being pushed one along. And this is sitting here in, well, half behind Kelly Clarkson apparently. If I need to, I'll shove it up so they form half on top of each other. But for now, I quite like having them as the full squares. Anyway, Invitation's mid-A tier. Good listening experience as a whole. So, I've already discussed In the Court of the Crimson King and Discipline. 3 of a perfect pair. I'll include some of their later albums, like I think it's called Kraftwerk. There's a couple of their albums which, again, love King Crimson. This is C tier. Riot by Paramore. Hayley Williams is an absolute gem. Need I say any more? The track's it's got some banging songs on the track. Another S minus. Here We Stand by the Fratellis. It's an interesting album. Another underrated artist. It's as an album, it's worth a listen, but I don't think that it's particularly. How do I put this? It's like the duality of D tier is either arse or it's not quite the experience that you would. Hmm. Or is this C? Actually, I'm going to do something slightly controversial here. I know I just ranked it C tier, but I'd say this is D plus, C minus. Vitelli's can sit here. That's about right. Okay. Some Kind of Trouble by James Blunt. The man's brilliant. So while I have Back to Bedlam in my top 5, this one, as great as James Blunt is, I think we're hitting high B. End of. Right, Divisions by Starset. It's a cool album design, but I feel in comparison to Transmissions and Vessels, this album just falls a little short. Again, brilliant band, but for me, I think Divisions sits about here. If we're gonna be honest with ourselves. Right, Who Am I by Pale Waves. So Pale Waves is awesome. I can't remember the lead singer's name. I'm really sorry, but she reminds me of Avril Lavigne, and Avril Lavigne is just awesome. But the album itself, about Snow Patrol tier, so high C, low B. Random Access Memories by Daft Punk. Yeah, I think I'm fairly certain this album was licensed for the Chon movie. I mean, as usual, it's got the Daft Punk there. The gentleman's heads on there is the album cover. I mean, the album's kind of basic in its design, but a lot of the Daft Punk albums are minimalist. It's a good listen, but it's not like I don't think I can't say it's A tier. I can't think where, but I think I'll stick it somewhere in B tier. It's in here somewhere, but I can't put my finger on it, so it's going there for now. Next, that's The Spirit by Bring Me the Horizon. Pretty good album. There's a couple of really good tracks. A big fan of Doomed. The song itself, That's the Spirit, is okay. I kind of like no. The song That's the Spirit is just the line taken from the song Happy Song. Anyway, the album's gonna sit somewhere in B tier as well. For now I can't quite figure that out, but Bring the Horizon's cool. This album's B tier, although some of the songs are like A or S tier. 3 Days Grace, Outsider. So this is where this was where 3 Days Grace's second frontman stepped in. Now this is an album. I'm not saying that the replacement lead vocalist is better than the previous one, because again, when you even out all the songs, that I believe they're as good as each other. But for me, this album is slightly better, and I think the album sits for me about here. Somewhere in A tier, somewhere kind of high in A tier. Right, Perfect Symmetry by Keane. Love Keane. Spoilers, my final one, top 5, I believe, will be the one that I've yet to mention. So Hopes and Fears was S. This one's C, actually. This one sits about on par with Divisions. I think because you've got Perfect Symmetry, Night Train, and Strangeland as King's last 3 albums, and because they only had 5 in the end. I think they're back together now because they're playing at what's it called, Latitude this year. But for me, this was the start of like their first 2 albums was just so miraculously good, and then this released, and it's just nah. Right, The Last Stand by Sabaton. So this one I was debating as part of my top 5 because this album is fantastic. This was about the time I started listening to them. It's got so many good songs. I love Shirayama. Rock's Drift is brilliant. Rock's Drift has one of my favourite lines in the whole album. How the Sabaton gents do it is just absolutely beyond me. So for me, this album sits above A Rush of Blood to the Head. It's definitely an S tier for me. In you go. Okay. All Right Still by Lily Allen. Yeah, I like Lily Allen. She's cool. Not as big of a fan of her covers of Keen because she did. Let me rephrase this. So her cover of Somewhere Only We Know, absolutely glorious. Her cover of Everybody's Changing, not quite the same. Sorry, Lily. But this album is pretty good. Uh, I'm gonna stick that in B tier. I think that's about on par, this specific album, with Natasha Bedingfield, but I think it's above Natasha Bedingfield, if I'm honest. So that goes there. Oh no, I just remembered my top five is going to get absolutely rocked because I forgot about Evanescence. Right, the bitter truth. Amy Lee, absolutely love her. She's absolutely awesome. She's so good. This was their sort of their re-debut. This was sort of their this was sort of their comeback album. The bitter truth is, oh my god, Broken Pieces Shine makes my arms stand on end. Go to Broken Pieces Shine. Go to 2 minutes 36 seconds in and just listen from there. Oh my god, her voice is just absolutely smashing. But for me, the whole album, right? This is controversial because I say that again, individual songs. I love Amy Lee, but this album in particular, I think hits a B tier for me. But there are some good ones on that album, somewhere between A and B. I might have to start doubling up some of these pictures, man. I forgot how many I actually put. Oh, I didn't forget how many I put on, but I didn't realize how many would be in the higher tiers. I need to either be more strict or move some pictures. Right, Sacrament of Sin by Powerwolf. Really cool album cover. I think the angriness just speaks volumes. I just double checking on the. This goes under good. Yeah, S tier is getting a little crowded for me. Let's bring that to the back. Perfect. I know how to use Roll20, I promise. No, I'm not. No, I haven't been using Tier Maker for this. I'm gonna throw that out there now. So the reason why I'm moving all of S tier is because this album I forgot to talk about it more. Sacrament of Sin is brilliant. I love Incense and Iron. Incense and Iron is such a good song. I'm also a big fan of Stoshkevgate. Wow, try that again, Henry. Stoshkevgate by I think that's like track 10 or whatever. There's some really good songs in there. I think this is S tier. Right. Petals for Armour by Hayley Williams on her own rather than as part of Paramore. Again, love Riot. They're an awesome band, Paramore. This album in particular has got some good hits, but I feel like this is it's not as good as The Bitter Truth. I might have to move it. But for now, let's say there. I'm happy with that. Awesome. Okay, Under the Iron Sea by Keane. And this is where I say I'm now going to get conflicted in my top five because this is in my top five. That's not even a question in my mind. I love Under the Iron Sea. So many good tracks. Hamburg song, Leaving So Soon, Atlantic. Oh my god, Atlantic as an opening is just amazing. So yeah, I think that's my top five. Not locked in, but you know, we're there. Such a good album. Next is The Balcony by Catfish and the Bottlemen. Again, I love their album designs. They're so good. And while I gave the ride a B tier, A tier even, apologies, this one gets. Oh, actually, this one gets A as well. But I'm going to have to finagle this a little because this one sits about here. Because, again, I love both of these albums, The Ride and The Balcony. But I feel like The Balcony has so many more of the hits that were just on point. So for me, that's a better album. Right, Life album by Iki Monogakari. Her voice, she is just so good. They're a brilliant band. Her voice is great, but as an album, B tier. But again, her voice, oh my god, so good. So next up, The Balance by Catfish. Uh, yeah, this one's not particularly great in comparison to the others. I hate to say it, but it's an album. When I first listened to it, I was just not overly impressed. C tier. Love Catfish. Not a big fan of The Balance. These albums, though, are where it's at. Okay. The Hives, your new favourite band. Yeah, no. Not quite Jollification by the Lightning Seeds, but certainly F tier. I think Jollification by the Lightning Seeds might become, if I do decide to actually properly do tier videos, that's going to be my standard for just pure, just throw it, burn it kind of tier. Right, X and Y. Excuse me just one moment. So, X and Y. Again, this was the last, oh, not the last one actually, because Viva La Vida was just before Milo Loto. But X and Y, very solid album. I don't think it's quite as good as. Right, I'm gonna have to start moving these across a little bit. So let's move A tier, because this is where I want to put X and Y. I want to put X and Y about. No, don't move both. Hold on. Technical issues. The production value on this video is crazy, man. Whoa, and he does his own special effects. Anyway, yeah, that's just about there. Fantabby dozy. I'm also going to bring some of these icons in a little bit because I think I have a few more that I wanted to discuss as A tier. Then again, and B tier. Back. Bring these across. Okay. Faded Seaside Glamour by Delays. His voice was just absolutely fantastic. I love Nearer Than Heaven. I love No Ending. But that whole album, as a whole, probably C tier. Again, a couple songs in there which are A and S tier, but on the whole, got to give it a C. Fragile by Yes. So, it's a good thing I moved A tier and B tier, because, I mean, I love Roundabout, and it's a good album to listen to, but I feel like it's a B+. Somewhere About Primo Victoria would sound about right. Whoa, it's all moving to the right. Crazy stuff. So it's about there. Right. Right on an Empty Street. Someone's got to move their top 5. Can I just, like, have this in my top 5? This is, like, my favourite album of all time. I might have to do something a little dirty here. Right. Because this is now a trifling decision. This album is just, Right on an Empty Street is just so good. I absolutely love it. This is 100% my top 5, no questions asked. And then what do I drop? James Blunt? Let's drop James Blunt. Yeah, let's drop James Blunt ever so slightly, but I do love I do really love Songs of Bedlam. This is what makes it so difficult because it's just, again, Songs About Jane is also in my top 10 probably. Like most of this here, these top 5 are probably in my top 10. But I think there's about 30 songs in my top 10, 30 albums in my top 10 if I'm quite honest. So it's a little bit difficult. Right, Hands All Over by Maroon 5. Yeah, um, C tier. About the same as Delays and the Balance. Most of these here are roughly the same sort of tier for me. Right, Quiet as the New Lad by Kings of Convenience. So again, Right on Empty Street, probably one of my favorite albums of all time. Love Declaration of Independence. Quiet as the New Loud though, doesn't quite hit the same. Um, in that regards, I would probably stick it here, but as like a C plus, because again, I love Kings of Convenience, but that album just doesn't do it for me, man. It's just not got quite the same impact. Although I do love Summer on the West Hill. Toxic Girl's okay, but King's Convenience is one of them examples where the first album's not great, but everything that followed was just liquid gold. Unlike Taylor Swift, 1989. Fairly certain this one was her first album. And this album cover, by the way, is the T Swift edition rather than the actual album. The I say actual album. This is the actual album, but this is her recorded version rather than the studio recorded version because the other one's of her as well. To be fair, so they're kind of similar pictures. But this is an easy S tier. In fact, I might move Paramore around, something like that. Taylor Swift is just amazing, but there you go. Right, Awake by Skillet. So, good band, very decent band, but this album, I think I need to do some jiggery pokery in C tier, if I'm honest. The back. Be gone, but let's see here. These guys can all move. I think Awake as an album is about here in the C tier, if I'm honest. Okay, Bad by Michael Jackson. Off the Wall and Thriller is sitting in S tier. This is sitting in A tier. Again, MJ had so many good songs and so many good albums, but this one just doesn't hit quite the same to the point where I think it goes about here, if we're honest. And based on what I just saw for the next one, I think this needs to be expanded down roughly, as does B tier. Excuse the technical difficulties while I move around square pictures. The difficulties that this man must go through, the trials and tribulations. Yeah, I'm glad I'm moving these tiers. Yes, this probably would have been easier on Tier Maker, but this is more fun in my opinion. Right, Life for Rent by Dido. What an album. What a person, what an album. This is A tier. Little discussion needed. To the point where I need to start moving this more. Again, part of the reason why I want to make this video is because I've had so many discussions about music with people that hopefully that I can bring an additional perspective of songs and that to other people that, who knows, everybody else might start listening to other stuff as well. Likewise, tell me something I need to listen to, and then I'll write out what tier I would put it in. So, Carolus Rex by Sabaton. This one's grown on me. When I first listened to it, it was somewhere about B tier. Then I listened to it, and then I listened to it. This is about Catfish in the bottom and the ride tier. It's about here, so it sits at a decent A tier. There we go. Nice. Okay. Unleashed by Skillet. Again, good album. This album's better than Awake. I'm sticking this in before Petals for Armor, actually. B tier. Lovely. Oh no. Oh no, oh no, oh no. When I said top 5, can I make it top 500? Is that allowed or is that foul play? Because this album is absolutely wonderful. Fallen by Evanescence. Oh my god. Again, Amy Lee is just such a boss. That voice. That voice, this album. That's all I have to say. Like, this is yet another. To the point where I like this album so much, it literally sits here. I listened the hell out of this album. I borrowed it off my sister a while ago, and then I kept hold of the album for about 6 months before I eventually ripped it onto my system so I could just have it. Okay, Viva La Vida or Death and All of His Friends. Wonderful album cover. If I can show it off a little better. Brilliant album cover. Yeah, just awesome. So had some really nice hits. Yes, everybody likes the titular song, but to be honest, yes, Violet Hill, 42, there was some banging songs on this album. And for that reason, I need to once again move my S tier and my A tier because I can't decide. I think this is like a A plus. Yeah, this is an A plus going on S tier. So let's move A down by 1 to something like that. Perfect. Next up, Bat Out of Hell by Meatloaf. Rest in peace. He had such a good voice. But not gonna lie, I think this applies to both. I mean, the album cover for Bat Out of Hell is just one of the best. And for Bat Out of Hell Part 2, Back into Hell. Both this and Bat Out of Hell 2, both the album covers are absolutely smashing. I should really do a music video tier list as well at some point because I'll do Anything for Love, but I won't do that. It's a brilliant music video. But as albums, they go in A tier. Next up, Do Wops and Hooligans by Bruno Mars. Simple album cover, but don't mistake the cover for its content. S tier. Brilliant album. Like, so good. So that's there. Easy. Right, this is Beyond the Neighborhood by Athlete. Yeah, so I think this is a low D. I think this sits between Quiet is the New Loud and Three of a Perfect Pair, if I'm honest. Again, Athlete's great, but this album is not the one. Let's go in here. Awesome. Ooh, this is not going to be a popular tier ranking. So, because American Idiot by Green Day. Yeah, American Idiot. Wake Me Up When September Ends. Fantastic songs. Streets of Suburbia being like 6 parts long or whatever it is. Yeah. This is why it's not going to be popular, because this sits about Primo Victoria, somewhere in mid B. Yeah. Next up, All the Lost Souls by James Blunt. I loved 1973, but the album itself, probably a probably a C tier. I'm putting more in C. I mean, I've got these are quite a few albums for me to rank. And yes, it's only from like 4 artists, 4 head, but it doesn't make it any easier to rank them within each other, especially when, like I say, so many of the artists are so good. Like, I might put Kamikaze in C tier, but Marshall Mathers / Eminem put such a stamp on the rap genre, it's unreal. And again, I love Sabaton, but why is there one of their albums a C tier? You know, I'm trying to rate fairly. Some things have got to be better than others. To which I say, All the Lost Souls as an album sits somewhere about Kamikaze level. Speaking of, so let's place it here. Oops, grab. Lovely. Next, Still on My Mind by Dido. Now, here's the surprise part. White Flag by Dido. No, that's not what this album was called, was it? Life for Rent, sorry. Life for Rent by Dido, of course. Great song, by the way. So, Life for Rent might have been an A tier, but I think Still on My Mind is actually A plus. I think she really pulled it out of the bag. So for now, although I'd probably say it's got to be set where Kelly Clarkson is, I think it goes here for now. I think I'd probably swap those two, but otherwise they're still within the high A tier for now. Okay. Oops, bring that to the front. Night Train by Keane. I've got little to say on this. I've said it earlier. Tom Chaplin's great. Their first albums were brilliant. But this is probably about Beyond the Neighborhood by Athlete, if I'm honest. So it's about there. Speaking of Athlete, I think this was the only other one I was going to cover, and that's Vehicles and Animals, their debut album. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'm just resizing it, but it pretty much goes where I had it for a second. It sits in A tier. It's high A, I feel. I'm just going to do some more shuffling here. I really thought I was going to be putting more stuff in C and B than I have been. I'm surprised I'm not putting more in S tier, if I'm honest. A little surprising. So this will sit in A tier. I think it's... Nah, I can't do that. That'll do. So, Blessed and Possessed by Powerwolf. I've already talked about how Sacrament of Sin was awesome. This album's also pretty good. He's actually a really cool guy, the leader of Powerwolf. He's got such a good voice. But I don't know, man. I think this sits under. It's got to sit right. First off, this is coming over here. I can't not do that. I think this will take its place for now. I think it's somewhere in B tier. But yeah, okay. I think that will sit here. Their other album, I can't remember quite what it's called, but it's the one with Werewolves of Armenia on it. The grey one with the circle with the cross on the front on it. That album's about in this place as well. Okay. Come on, grab it. Parachutes by Coldplay. I once again ask the question, can I make my top 5 a top 50? Because this album, as an album entirely to listen to, oh my god. It is just fantastic. I think it's going directly where I've just made the hole, actually. Like, oh my god. This is why my top 10 is so difficult, because even one per artist, Back to Bedlam, Fallen, Songs About Jane, and Parachutes should all be up here respectively. I wanted to make this my top 5. I might extend it to top 10 from nothing more than my own personal desperation. Can I edit this text? I made the text uneditable because I'm on the tokens layer. Ah, okay. Oh well. Oh no, I can't edit this. Oh well. Not everything's equal in life. Moving on. Rise and Fall, Rage and Grace by The Offspring. I think this was their first one, maybe their second album. Good album. But I can't see it getting anything higher than an A tier. So I'm just gonna slip that. I mean, I can't in all good conscience put that above The Bitter Truth, even if this isn't quite accurate in its placements entirely anymore. Oh, here's a controversial opinion. The Wall by Pink Floyd is better than Dark Side of the Moon. Controversial opinion. That again, this is my opinion. I know this one's gonna be given a. I know everybody's gonna be like, fight me on this one. But for me, I feel like it can take this spot here. For me, it's like a B plus into A. For me personally. So I'm happy with that for now. Oh, this is the last one. Fantastic. What a good one to end on. News of the World by Queen. Love the band. Love the band. Freddie Mercury. As I say, while Joachim's my favourite living baritone, Freddie Mercury is my actual favourite baritone. He was just such a born entertainer. And yes, he was a natural baritone. He was just able to sing in more keys, more like octaves than like almost any other voice in the world. It's actually quite impressive. But for me, this album particularly sits almost exactly where Life for Rent is right now. I'm going to be cheeky and do that for now. I think it sits pretty much at The Wall by Pink Floyd. So, there we go. That's a cheeky little tier list of a fair few amount of albums. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't physically own every single one of these albums, but most of them have gone through my hands. Odd one or two are pretty hard to get, such as Life Album by Iki Monogakure, because it costs like 90 quid on Amazon, man. Don't be wrong, love the band, but just go on Spotify. But yeah, I'm ready for any other suggestions on albums. I'll give them a listen, and I'll give them what I think is a tier. Otherwise, that's it. I've been quite looking forward to make this one, so peace.